The signal screamed across the void, a desperate cry that no one wanted to hear. Elder Nisara pressed her trembling hands against the communications panel, watching the status indicators blink with cruel indifference. 47 hours since the first transmission. 47 hours of silence from the Galactic Council. Around her, the colony's emergency shelter shook as another explosion rocked the surface above. Dust rained from the ceiling and someone's child began to cry. "Any response?" asked her assistant, though they both knew the answer. Nisara shook her head. The Taurine were not warriors. They had no weapons, no defenses beyond faith in the Council's protection. That faith was dying as quickly as her people. Through the shelter's single viewport, she could see smoke rising from what used to be the agricultural district. The Krath had been methodical in their destruction, taking what they wanted and burning the rest. 3 systems away, Council Speaker Thorum reviewed the same distress signal for the 5th time. His secondary arms twitched with discomfort as he prepared his recommendation. The mathematics were simple, even cruel. Haven's Rest held 4,000 Taurine colonists. Mounting a rescue operation would require at least 8 warships, 3 support vessels, and a minimum of 2 months to organize. The colony produced nothing of strategic value. They grew flowers and wrote poetry. "The motion is called," Thorum announced to the assembled council members. "Intervention in the Haven's Rest crisis." The debate lasted 17 minutes. Some members argued for mercy. Others pointed to a dozen similar crises across the galaxy. Resources were finite. Choices had to be made. When the vote concluded, the result surprised no one. 43 members voted against intervention. 12 voted in favor. 8 abstained. Thorum composed the official response himself, keeping his words carefully neutral. The council extended its sympathies. They recommended the colonists surrender to minimize casualties. They promised to lodge a formal protest with the Krath Dominion through proper diplomatic channels. The message would take 6 hours to reach Haven's Rest. It would arrive far too late to matter. What Thorum didn't know was that the Taurine had broadcast their distress call on every frequency, not just council channels. The signal had rippled outward like stones thrown in a pond, touching systems that the council barely acknowledged. One of those signals had reached a species that made Thorum deeply uncomfortable. Admiral Patricia Okoye was reviewing supply requisitions when Lieutenant Davis interrupted her. The young officer looked pale, which immediately caught her attention. Davis had served on 4 combat deployments. He didn't pale easily. "Ma'am, we've intercepted something. You need to hear this." The audio was poor quality, translated through 3 different languages before reaching human receivers. But the fear in Elder Nisara's voice needed no translation. Okoye listened to the entire message twice, her expression hardening with each repetition. "How long ago was this sent?" 49 hours, ma'am." "We've been monitoring council traffic." They voted not to respond. Okoye felt something cold settle in her chest. She had read the reports about the Galactic Council, their endless debates and careful calculations. Humanity had petitioned for membership twice and been politely declined. Too young, they said. Too aggressive. Too unpredictable. The subtext was clear. Too dangerous. Get me the Coalition Council. Emergency session. Within 3 hours, representatives from every human government gathered via secure channel. Okoye presented the situation without embellishment. She showed them the distress call, the council's response, and the latest intelligence on Krath raiding patterns. Then she waited. The debate was surprisingly brief. Earth's representative spoke first, her voice carrying the weight of 10 billion citizens. "We didn't join the stars to watch people die because it's inconvenient to save them." Mars agreed. So did the Belt colonies, the Titan settlements, and the Europa science communities. The vote was unanimous. Humanity would respond. "We'll need the 3rd Fleet," Okoye said, already running calculations. "Full battle group. I can have them ready to depart in 18 hours. "You understand the council won't approve this," warned the Luna delegate. "They might see it as an act of aggression." "They can see it however they want," Okoye replied. "We're not asking permission." The news spread through human space at light speed. Crews were recalled from leave. Supply ships raced to rendezvous points. The 3rd Fleet had been designed for deep space combat, built heavy and tough like everything humans made. Their ships didn't have the elegant lines of council vessels. They were blunt instruments, engineered by a species that had clawed its way up from a world that tried to kill them every day. Captain Royan D.I. received his orders while his ship was in dock for scheduled maintenance. The work crews didn't bother asking questions. They simply worked faster. Within 14 hours, his carrier group was ready. Within 17, the entire fleet had assembled. Okoye addressed them from the flagship's command center, her image broadcast to every ship. She kept it simple because the situation was simple. 4,000 people are dying while the galaxy watches. They've been deemed not worth saving. I disagree. Humanity disagrees. We're going to Haven's Rest and we're going to end this. The Krath will have one chance to surrender. Just one. After that, we do what we do best. No one asked what that meant. Everyone knew. Humanity had spent 300,000 years learning to survive on a planet with predators, diseases, and natural disasters that would horrify most galactic species. They had taken those lessons to the stars. The Third Fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, leaving human space behind. Their destination was 18 days away at maximum speed. The Council would know about their departure within hours. Okoye didn't care. She had stopped caring what the Council thought the moment they voted to let innocent people die. On Haven's Rest, Elder Nisara had given up hope of rescue. She gathered her people in the deepest shelter and began teaching the children old prayers. If they were to die, they would die remembering who they were. The Krath could take their lives, but not their culture. She didn't know that help was coming. She didn't know that a species she had never heard of was crossing the void at speeds that bent physics. She didn't know that the galaxy was about to learn a hard lesson about humanity. Some species evolved to think. Some evolved to build. Humanity evolved to survive. And they had never forgotten how. Dr. Indira Sharma had seen many strange things during her career as a xenobiologist. But watching an entire battle fleet prepare for war in less than a day still amazed her. She strapped herself into the transport shuttle, feeling the familiar heavy pull of Earth-standard gravity. Most species would find it crushing. Humans called it comfortable. The shuttle lifted from the Mars shipyards, and through the viewport she could see the Third Fleet taking shape. 43 warships, each one a testament to human engineering philosophy. Other species built their vessels light and fast, elegant and efficient. Humans built theirs to take damage and keep fighting. The ships looked brutal because they were brutal, covered in armor plating that served no purpose except to absorb punishment. "First time seeing a fleet deployment?" asked the pilot, noticing her stare. "First time being part of one," Sharma admitted. "I'm supposed to advise on alien biology. Make sure we understand what we're dealing with," the pilot grunted. "The Krath are raiders. Not much to understand. They take what they want and hurt anyone who objects." Sharma had read the files. The Krath Dominion controlled 18 systems, all of them taken by force. They were physically powerful with 4 arms and dense muscle structure. In single combat, a Krath warrior could overpower almost any other species. They had built their entire culture around strength and dominance. They had never fought humans before. The shuttle docked with the flagship, a massive carrier named the Defiant. Sharma made her way through corridors that felt too wide, too tall, designed for human proportions. Everything was overbuilt. The walls were thicker than necessary. The support beams could handle twice the rated load. It was inefficient by galactic standards, but galactic standards assumed your ship wouldn't get hit. Human ships assumed they would get hit repeatedly. Admiral Okoye was in the strategy room when Sharma arrived, surrounded by holographic displays showing Haven's Rest and the surrounding space. Captain NDI stood beside her, along with Commander Hiro Tanaka, who led the Marine battalions. All three looked focused but not worried. Sharma had learned that humans wore a different expression when they were actually concerned. "Dr. Sharma," Okoye acknowledged. "Good. I need your assessment of Telrine physiology. How much punishment can they take?" It was such a human question. Not what do they eat or what do they believe, but how much damage can they survive? Sharma pulled up her files. "They're fragile by our standards. Low bone density. Minimal cardiovascular capacity. The gravity on Haven's Rest is 0.7 Earth standard. Much higher and they start having health problems. So we need to end this fast," Tanaka said. "Extended combat in the colony areas could hurt them as much as help them." "The Krath won't expect fast," NDI added, studying the tactical display. "Council fleets take weeks to mobilize. They'll think they have time." Okoye nodded slowly. "That's what we're counting on. Intelligence suggests the Krath have 6 ships in system. Heavy cruisers. Well-armed, but not designed for sustained engagement. Their doctrine is hit hard, grab what they want and leave before anyone responds. "They're not leaving this time," Tanaka said flatly. A communication alert interrupted them. The Council had sent an official message, routed through every available channel to ensure humanity received it. Okoye played it for the group. Council Speaker Thorum's voice was careful, diplomatic, and utterly infuriating. He acknowledged humanity's concern for Haven's Rest. He appreciated their enthusiasm. However, the situation was delicate and required measured response through proper channels. The Council strongly advised humanity to stand down and allow diplomatic solutions to proceed. The message ended with a veiled threat about consequences for unauthorized military action in Council space. Okoye deleted it without responding. "They really think we'll just turn around," Di said, shaking his head. "They don't understand us yet," Sharma offered. "The Council species, they evolved on stable worlds. Predictable climates, abundant resources, few natural predators. They think everyone calculates cost versus benefit the same way they do. And we don't," Tanaka finished. "We can't," Sharma corrected. "Humans evolved on a world that was actively trying to kill us. Predators, diseases, weather extremes, earthquakes, volcanoes. We learned young that sometimes the only choice is to fight or die. The Council learned to negotiate and calculate. We learned to survive. It was why human medicine was so advanced, why their ships were so tough, why their soldiers trained in conditions that would hospitalize most species. Earth had been a harsh teacher. Humanity had been an excellent student. The fleet jumped to FTL on schedule, tearing through space at velocities that made Sharma's stomach turn. She spent the journey studying everything available about the Krath and the Talreen, preparing briefings for the combat teams. The Marines would need to know how to fight in Talreen-compatible environments without destroying them. Commander Tanaka's troops trained constantly during the 18-day journey. Sharma watched some of the exercises and had to look away. They practiced boarding actions, fighting in zero gravity, engaging targets while wounded. Other species considered boarding enemy ships suicidal. Humans considered it standard procedure. "Why do they volunteer for this?" she asked Tanaka during one session. The commander paused, considering the question seriously. "Because someone has to, and because we're good at it." It was such a simple answer, such a human answer. On day 16, they received updated intelligence. The Krath were still in the Haven's Rest system, still raiding. They had made no attempt to leave, clearly confident that no response was coming. The Council's non-intervention had been broadcast on public channels. As far as the Krath knew, they were safe to take their time. Okoye called a final briefing for all ship commanders. Sharma attended, watching as the Admiral laid out the battle plan with brutal efficiency. The fleet would drop from FTL at the system's edge, use the asteroid belt for cover while they assessed the situation, then advance in 3 waves. The first wave would disable the Krath ships. The second would establish orbital superiority. The third would deploy Marines for boarding actions and ground support. "Rules of engagement are simple," Okoye said. "We give them 1 warning, 1 chance to surrender. If they refuse, we end them. But we end them clean. No war crimes, no unnecessary casualties. We're here to stop the Krath, not become them." Every commander nodded. They understood the distinction. Humans could be brutal, but they weren't cruel. There was a difference. The fleet spent the final 2 days running simulations, checking weapons systems, preparing for every contingency. Sharma reviewed medical protocols for treating injured Talreen, making sure the human medics understood the biological differences. She tried not to think about how many injuries there might be. On day 18, the fleet prepared to drop from FTL. Sharma strapped into her station in the medical bay, surrounded by equipment that could treat both human and alien casualties. Through the ship's internal feed, she heard Admiral Okoye's voice, calm and certain. "All ships prepare for real space transition. We're going in fast and we're going in ready. The Krath think no one cares about Haven's Rest. Let's prove them wrong." The ship shuddered as it dropped from FTL, and Sharma felt her stomach lurch. Through the viewports, she could see stars again. Real stars, not the distorted smears of faster-than-light travel. Somewhere ahead, 4,000 Talreen were still fighting to survive. They weren't alone anymore. The Deathworlders had arrived. Warlord Grant examined the latest inventory from the surface with satisfaction. The Talreen colony had yielded more than expected. Precious metals, refined materials, and enough food supplies to feed his crews for months. The colonists themselves would fetch a decent price in the outer markets. Weak species always did. His second-in-command entered the command chamber. all forearms carrying data tablets. The Western District is secured. Minimal resistance. Of course minimal, Grant said, his mandibles clicking with amusement. There, Talreen. I've seen more fight in cargo haulers. The distress signals have stopped. Good. That means they've finally accepted reality. Grant settled into his command throne, built to accommodate his massive frame. The Krath averaged over 2 meters tall and massed twice what most species did. Strength was everything in their culture. The Talreen, barely reaching his chest height, were nothing. He had received word of the Council's vote days ago. No intervention, no rescue. It confirmed what Grant had always known. The Council was weak. They hid their cowardice behind words like diplomacy and measured response. The strong took what they wanted. The weak suffered. A proximity alert chimed. Grant's tactical officer checked the readings and frowned. Warlord, we have multiple contacts at the system's edge. They just dropped from FTL. Probably merchants, Grant said, unconcerned, fleeing before they get caught in the crossfire. Ignore them, but the contacts didn't flee. They advanced, moving through the asteroid belt with surprising precision. Grant pulled up the tactical display. His interest finally peaked. 43 ships, military configuration, heading directly toward Haven's Rest. Get me identification. The tactical officer worked in silence for several moments, then looked up with confusion. The signatures don't match any Council fleet. The design is wrong. Too much mass, inefficient power distribution. They're reading as human. Grant's mandibles stopped clicking. Humans. He had heard of them, the newcomers from the outer spiral. Primitive species, barely a century in space. They had caused some minor incidents with Council shipping. Territorial disputes over uninhabited systems. Nothing serious. Certainly nothing that warranted bringing a fleet to Haven's Rest. How long until they reach us? At current speed, 4 hours, and hail them. Find out what they want. The communication channel opened and a human face appeared on the display. Female, dark-skinned, with eyes that reminded Grant of predators he had hunted on his homeworld. She wore a uniform he didn't recognize and spoke in clear galactic standard. Krath vessels. This is Admiral Patricia Okoye of the Human Third Fleet. You are engaged in hostile action against a civilian population. Cease all operations immediately. Release your prisoners and prepare to be boarded. You have one opportunity to comply. This is your only warning. Grant stared at the transmission in disbelief, then began to laugh. The sound echoed through the command chamber, his crew joining in. Humans ordering him to surrender. It was absurd. Tell the human we appreciate her concern, he said, still laughing. But Haven's Rest is now under Krath jurisdiction. She should return to her own space before she embarrass herself further. The human admiral's expression didn't change. That was your chance. You chose poorly. The channel closed. Grant's laughter died. There was something in the human's voice, a certainty that unsettled him. He checked the tactical display again. The human fleet was still advancing, not slowing, not hesitating. Battle stations, he ordered. If they want to fight, we'll show them why the Krath don't fear anyone. His 6 cruisers moved into formation, weapons charging. Grant had fought Council ships before. They relied on shields and maneuverability, dancing around each other while exchanging precision fire. It was warfare as performance art, carefully calculated to minimize losses. The Krath preferred direct confrontation, raw power against raw power. The human fleet didn't slow. They came in 3 waves just as Okoye had planned. The first wave opened fire at a range that made Grant's tactical officer hiss in surprise. They're using kinetics, railguns, mass drivers, no energy weapons at all. The first salvo hit Grant's shields like hammers, physical projectiles moving at relativistic speeds, carrying kinetic energy that energy shields weren't designed to fully deflect. His shields held, but the drain was enormous. Return fire. The Krath unleashed their plasma batteries, beautiful arcs of superheated matter that could melt through most ship hulls. They scored direct hits on multiple human vessels. Grant watched with satisfaction as the impacts registered. Then his satisfaction died. The human ships kept coming. Their armor plating absorbed hits that should have crippled them. Where other species would have broken off to assess damage, the humans accelerated. They weren't fighting like the Council. They were fighting like berserkers. The second wave crashed into his formation and Grant realized his mistake. Human ships weren't designed for elegant warfare. They were designed for brawling. Close range, brutal, trading damage for damage. His cruisers were powerful, but they weren't built to take the punishment the humans were dishing out. Focus fire on their flagship. Grant ordered. If he could kill the Admiral, maybe the humans would break. Every Krath weapon targeted the Defiant. The human carrier absorbed the barrage, its armor buckling but not breaking. Return fire came immediately. Railgun rounds punching through shields and hull plating. One of Grant's cruisers lost power, tumbling out of formation. Then the third wave arrived, and Grant felt real fear for the first time in his career. Boarding pods. Dozens of them, launched from human ships and accelerating toward his fleet. No species used boarding actions anymore. It was too dangerous, too unpredictable. But the humans weren't asking permission. They were taking what they wanted. Repel boarders, Grant shouted, but he could hear the panic in his own voice. The first pod hit his flagship with an impact that shook the entire vessel. Cutting torches burned through the hull, and then they were inside. Human soldiers, wearing armor that made them look even more massive than they were, moving through his ship like a plague. Grant's guards met them in the corridors. Krath warriors, the finest fighters in the Dominion, forearmed and trained from birth. They should have torn the humans apart. They didn't. The humans fought like nothing Grant had ever seen. They took hits that would kill most species and kept fighting. They worked in teams, covering each other, moving with precision that spoke of endless training. When a Krath warrior grabbed one human soldier, 2 others shot the warrior from different angles. When they lost ground, they fell back in order, never panicking, never breaking, and they never, ever stopped. Grant watched through internal cameras as his forces were pushed back, deck by deck. The humans cleared each section methodically, securing prisoners and treating wounded. They weren't killing unnecessarily, but they weren't showing mercy to anyone who kept fighting either. Commander Tanaka led the assault on the command chamber personally. Grant's last guards died defending the entrance, and then the human was there, pointing a weapon that looked too large for any single being to carry. "Warlord Grant," Tanaka said calmly, "you're finished. Order your remaining ships to stand down." Grant looked at the human, really looked at him for the first time. Tanaka was bleeding from a wound on his shoulder, favoring his left leg, breathing hard, but his weapon never wavered. Behind him, more human soldiers secured the chamber, efficient and professional. "You can't win," Grant said. "Even if you take my ships, the Dominion will send more." "Then we'll deal with them too," Tanaka replied. "Your choice is simple. Surrender now or we keep fighting. You saw how that worked out." Grant's mandibles clicked slowly, processing options that no longer existed. His fleet was crippled. His flagship was taken. The humans had done in hours what should have been impossible. He gave the order. His remaining ships surrendered. Admiral Okoye's voice came over the general channel, broadcasting to both fleets. "All Krath personnel stand down and prepare to be processed as prisoners of war. You will be treated according to established conventions. Medical assistance will be provided for wounded. Resistance will be met with appropriate force." Grant slumped in his command throne, defeated. He had underestimated the humans. The entire Krath Dominion had underestimated them. They weren't like the Council, with their rules and careful calculations. They were something else entirely. Something old and dangerous that the galaxy had forgotten could exist. They were survivors who had learned to fight on a world that wanted them dead, and they had just announced themselves to the galaxy in the only language the Krath understood: overwhelming, unstoppable force. Elder Nisara felt the tremors stop and thought she was dying. 72 hours of constant bombardment, of hiding in shelters while her world burned above, had taught her that silence meant the end. Either the Krath had finished their work, or she had finally lost consciousness. Then she heard a voice she didn't recognize, speaking in heavily accented Talreen through the shelter's emergency speakers. "This is Lieutenant Sarah Wong of the Human Coalition. The Krath have surrendered. You're safe now. We're coming to get you out." Nisara didn't believe it. Couldn't believe it. The Council had abandoned them. No one was coming. No one cared about a colony of artists and philosophers on the galaxy's edge. She had made her peace with death. The shelter door opened anyway. Light flooded in, making her eyes ache after so long in darkness. Figures moved in the entrance, tall and bulky in protective gear. One of them removed their helmet, revealing a human face. Wong, presumably. She smiled, though her eyes were sad. "It's over," Wong said simply. "You're safe." Around Nisara, her people began to weep. Some from relief, others from grief for those they had lost. Nisara herself felt numb, disconnected from reality. Humans. She had barely heard of humans. Why would they come? The rescue operation took 18 hours. Human soldiers moved through the colony with surprising gentleness, helping survivors to evacuation zones, treating injuries, providing food and water. Nisara watched one massive human marine carry an elderly Talreen to safety, cradling the frail being with the same care one might hold a child. Dr. Sharma appeared at Nisara's side, introducing herself as a xenobiologist. We need to check everyone for injuries and illness. Our medical technology is very advanced, but we need to be careful. What works for humans might be too strong for Talreen. Why are you here? Nisara finally asked. Why did you come? Sharma looked surprised by the question. Because you needed help. Isn't that enough? It should have been. In a better galaxy, it would have been. But Nisara had lived long enough to know the galaxy didn't work that way. The council said it wasn't worth the resources. The council can go to hell, Sharma said, then caught herself. Sorry, that's not diplomatic. But humans don't calculate morality in terms of resources. You needed help. We could provide it. Everything else is just noise. Medical teams set up field hospitals in the least damaged buildings. Nisara watched human doctors treat Talreen patients with equipment that looked terrifyingly advanced. One young colonist had suffered severe burns. The human medic used a device that sealed the wounds and began tissue regeneration within minutes. Technology like that should have taken hours, required specialized facilities. Your medicine, Nisara said to Sharma. It's far ahead of what the council uses. Necessity, Sharma explained. Humans get hurt a lot. We evolved on a dangerous world. We learn to fix ourselves quickly or die. Every human medic trains to treat injuries that would horrify most species. It makes us very good at emergency medicine. The death toll was devastating. 843 Talreen had died during the Krath occupation. More than a fifth of the colony. Nisara stood among the bodies wrapped in traditional mourning cloth and felt the weight of every loss. These were her people, her responsibility. She had failed to protect them. Admiral Okoye found her there, standing alone in the temporary morgue. The human admiral didn't offer platitudes or empty comfort. She simply stood beside Nisara, honoring the dead with silence. We should have come sooner, Okoye finally said. You came at all, Nisara replied. That's more than anyone else did. That doesn't make it enough. They stood together a while longer. Nisara appreciated that the human didn't try to diminish her grief or rush her through it. Humans understood loss. Their history was written in it. The Krath prisoners were secured in holding facilities aboard human ships. Nisara saw Warlord Grent being escorted past her, his massive frame shackled and diminished. He looked at her with something that might have been shame. She looked away. She had no words for him. What will happen to them? She asked Okoye. They'll be processed as prisoners of war, treated according to established conventions. Eventually, they'll face trial for their crimes. That's not our decision to make alone. The council will object. They always do. Okoye's expression hardened. I've prepared a message for the council. Would you like to hear it before I send it? Nisara nodded. Okoye pulled up a recording on her personal device. The Admiral's recorded face was composed, but her eyes blazed with controlled anger. Council Speaker Thorum, this is Admiral Patricia Okoye. The Haven's Rest crisis has been resolved. The Krath raiding force has been neutralized and their personnel taken into custody. The Talreen colony is secure. 4,000 beings are alive today because humanity chose to act. 843 are dead because the Galactic Council chose to deliberate. I want you to understand something. You ignored their screams. You calculated the cost of their lives and found it too expensive. You chose politics over morality. We did not. We will never apologize for that choice. If the Council wishes to discuss our unauthorized military action, I welcome that conversation. But it will be a very short discussion. We saved lives. You counted them. History will judge which approach was correct. The recording ended. Nisara felt tears running down her face, though whether from grief or gratitude she couldn't say. Send it, she said. Okoye nodded and transmitted the message through every available channel. Within hours it had spread across the galaxy, carried by news services, private communications, and word of mouth. The response was immediate and divided. Some council members were outraged. Humanity had acted without authorization, violated protocols, and threatened the careful balance of galactic politics. Others were quieter, more thoughtful, A few sent private messages of support that they couldn't voice publicly, and across the galaxy other species began to talk. Species that had sent their own distress calls over the years, calls that had been ignored or deemed too expensive to answer. They looked at Haven's Rest and saw what was possible when someone actually cared. The Talreen colony began the slow work of rebuilding. Human engineers assisted, showing them techniques for rapid construction. Human supplies arrived daily, more than enough to sustain the survivors. Nisara tried to discuss payment, repayment, some kind of compensation. "You don't owe us anything," Captain Ndi told her. "This isn't a transaction." "Then what is it?" "It's what neighbors do. You needed help. We provided it. When we need help someday, maybe you'll remember that." It was such a simple philosophy, such a human philosophy. Help because it's right, not because it's profitable. 3 weeks after the battle, Nisara called a formal gathering of the surviving colonists. They met in what remained of the central plaza, surrounded by buildings that bore scars of Krath weapons. Admiral Okoye attended, along with Captain Ndiaye, Commander Tanaka, and Dr. Sharma. Nisara spoke in her traditional role as elder, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd. "We Talreen have always believed that civilization is measured not by strength of arms, but by strength of spirit, by compassion, wisdom, and commitment to peace. The Galactic Council taught us that these values were universal, shared by all enlightened species. We were wrong. The Council does not share our values. They abandoned us to preserve their resources. But another species, one we barely knew, crossed the galaxy to save us. The humans did not calculate our worth. They simply saw our need and answered." She turned to Okoye. "On behalf of my people, I formally request an alliance with humanity, not as subjects, not as dependents, but as partners. We offer what we have, our knowledge, our culture, our friendship. It is little compared to what you have given us, but it is offered freely and with gratitude." Okoye stepped forward and Nisara saw tears in the human admiral's eyes. "Elder Nisara, humanity accepts your friendship and your alliance. We don't need payment or tribute. Just remember that when others need help, you help them. Pass it forward. Make the galaxy a little better than you found it." The crowd of Talreen began a traditional song of thanksgiving, their voices rising in harmony. The humans stood and listened, honoring the moment with respectful silence. Later, as the human fleet prepared to depart, leaving behind a support team to assist with reconstruction, Nisara gave Okoye a small gift. It was a flower from her personal garden, preserved in resin, one of the few that had survived the occupation. "So you remember us," Nisara said. Okoye accepted it carefully. "We won't forget. No one should have to face what you faced alone." The human fleet departed, leaving Haven's Rest to heal, but across the galaxy the message had been received. Humanity had announced itself not with declarations or diplomacy, but with action. They had shown what they valued and what they were willing to fight for. The galaxy would never look at them the same way again. Council Speaker Thorum had not slept properly in 6 days. The emergency session had been called within hours of Admiral Okoye's message reaching the council chambers, and the debate had been raging ever since. His office was filled with official protests, diplomatic demands, and private communications that painted a picture of a galaxy in turmoil. The human action at Haven's Rest had fractured the Council's carefully maintained consensus. Some members demanded immediate sanctions. Others suggested military response. A few, quietly, suggested the Council examine its own failures. Ambassador Neil Foster sat across from Thorum in the Council Speaker's private office, looking remarkably calm for someone whose species had just violated every diplomatic protocol in the Galactic Handbook. The human diplomat was younger than Thorum expected, with an easy manner that seemed at odds with the seriousness of the situation. "You understand the position you've put us in," Thorum said, keeping his tone neutral. "Unauthorized military action in Council space. Engagement with a sovereign power. Taking prisoners without judicial authority. These are serious violations. I understand you let 4,000 people suffer because it was inconvenient to save them," Foster replied, his casual tone gone. "That seems like a more serious violation to me. The situation was complex. Resources are finite. We cannot respond to every crisis. You can. You choose not to," There's a difference. Thorum felt his secondary arms twitch with frustration. The galaxy operates on rules, Ambassador. Without those rules, we have chaos. You have chaos anyway, Foster said. The Krath have been raiding for decades. Everyone knows it. The Council files protests and does nothing. How many colonies have burned while you debated proper procedure? Before Thorum could respond, his assistant interrupted with an urgent message. Another species had requested an emergency audience. The Velen, a small reptilian race from the inner systems. Thorum granted it, grateful for the interruption. The Velen representative entered, her scales reflecting the office lighting in nervous patterns. Council Speaker, I come with a formal request. 3 years ago, my homeworld sent a distress call. Raiders, much like the Krath, attacked our mining settlements. We sent 72 separate messages to the Council. We received sympathetic responses and promises of diplomatic intervention. 2,000 of my people died waiting for that intervention. Thorum felt something cold settle in his chest. I remember. The situation was evaluated, but the cost of military response was deemed prohibitive. My people died because we weren't worth the cost. The Velen said quietly. The humans saved the Talreen in days. I am here to formally request an alliance with humanity. If the Council cannot or will not protect us, we will seek protection elsewhere. She left before Thorum could form a response. Foster watched the exchange without comment, but something in his expression suggested he had expected this. Over the following days, 14 more species requested similar audiences. Some had sent distress calls that were ignored. Others had been victims of piracy, exploitation, or territorial aggression that the Council had addressed only through strongly worded statements. All of them wanted the same thing: contact with humanity. The Council chamber itself became a battlefield of ideology. The traditionalists, led by the Drexen delegation, argued for strict sanctions against humanity. The reformists, a growing coalition, led by younger Council members, argued that Haven's Rest exposed fundamental flaws in Council policy. The humans acted rashly, the Drexen delegate declared, his 3 heads speaking in unison. They prioritized emotion over reason, violence over diplomacy. If we allow this precedent, the galaxy descends into warfare. The humans acted decisively, countered a delegate from the Meridian cluster. They saw beings in danger and helped them. When did that become controversial? The debate went in circles, but underneath the rhetoric, Thorum could feel the ground shifting. The Council had maintained peace for millennia through careful deliberation and cautious action. But peace for whom? The species strong enough to defend themselves? The systems wealthy enough to warrant protection? What about everyone else? A private message arrived from the Krath Dominion, and its contents made Thorum's blood run cold. The Dominion demanded the return of Warlord Grent and his crew, threatened military action against humanity, and insisted the Council enforce its own regulations. Foster read the same message in his own office and sent a single-line response to Admiral Okoye. They're threatening us. Thought you should know. Okoye's reply came within the hour. Let them try. The tension escalated when a Krath battle fleet moved toward human space. Thorum watched the tactical displays with growing dread. If shooting started, the Council would be forced to choose sides, and he was no longer certain which side most members would choose. The crisis resolved itself in a way no one anticipated. The Krath fleet entered human territory and was met by the entire 5th Fleet, freshly deployed from Earth. The Krath commander took one look at the human formation, remembered what happened to Warlord Grent, and requested negotiations. The talks lasted 6 hours. The Krath agreed to cease all raiding operations in exchange for the return of their personnel, minus Grent and his senior officers who would face trial. They also agreed to pay reparations to the Talreen and submit to Council monitoring of their border systems. Foster presented the agreement to the Council with a simple statement. Sometimes the threat of force accomplishes what diplomacy cannot. We're willing to use both. But the real turning point came when Elder Nisara addressed the Council directly. Thorum granted her the floor, curious what the Talreen elder would say. She stood before the assembled delegates, small and frail compared to most species present, and spoke with quiet authority. I have lived for 200 cycles, Nisara said. I have devoted my life to philosophy and the pursuit of peace. I believed the Council represented the highest ideals of civilization. When the Krath came, I trusted the Council would protect us. I was wrong. The Council calculated our worth and found us wanting. 843 of my people died while you deliberated. The humans did not calculate, they did not debate. They came because we needed help. That is civilization. That is what enlightenment looks like. She paused, letting her words sink in. The Council faces a choice. You can punish humanity for exposing your failures, or you can learn from them. You can continue as you have, protecting only those who can afford protection, or you can remember why the Council was formed. To prevent suffering. To protect the weak. To ensure that no being faces extinction alone. The chamber fell silent. Thorum looked around at the assembled delegates and saw the same uncomfortable realization on many faces. They had been confronted with their own inadequacy, and the messenger had been the very species they had failed. Ambassador Foster stood to address the Council. We're not trying to replace you or undermine your authority. We're trying to fix a broken system. The galaxy is too large for the Council to protect alone. You need allies who can respond quickly, who aren't paralyzed by bureaucracy. We're offering partnership, not competition. What exactly are you proposing? Thorum asked. A rapid response coalition. Humanity and any other species willing to commit forces for immediate deployment in crisis situations. We work alongside the Council, not against it. When distress calls come in, we respond while you handle the diplomatic aspects. We're the emergency response. You're the long-term solution. It was radical. It was unprecedented. It was also, Thorum had to admit, necessary. The debate continued for another week. The traditionalists fought every compromise, but they were losing ground. Too many species had stepped forward with stories of ignored distress calls. Too many council members had privately admitted they were ashamed of Haven's Rest. Finally, a vote was called. The resolution was carefully worded. The Council would formally acknowledge the formation of a rapid response coalition, operating under specific guidelines and subject to Council oversight. It wasn't everything the reformists wanted, but it was a start. The vote passed by a narrow margin. 47 in favor, 38 opposed, 15 abstaining. Foster sent a message to Earth. We have formal recognition. The RRC is legitimate. Okoye's response. Now the real work begins. Within a month, 12 species had formally joined the coalition. The Talreen naturally were first. The Velen followed, along with others who had suffered while the Council deliberated. They contributed what they could: ships, resources, intelligence networks, strategic locations. Humanity provided the military backbone, but the coalition was truly galactic. Each species brought its own strengths. The Meridians had excellent sensor technology. The Velen knew the trade routes where pirates operated. The Talreen offered diplomatic skills and cultural knowledge. Thorum watched it all unfold with mixed feelings. The Council's authority had been diminished, but perhaps that was necessary. Perhaps they had held too tightly to power for too long, forgetting why they had been given it in the first place. He requested a private meeting with Foster. When the human arrived, Thorum spoke honestly for the first time. You've changed the galaxy, he said. I'm not certain if it's for better or worse. Neither am I, Foster admitted. But doing nothing while people suffered wasn't working. At least now we're trying something different. The Council will be watching. If the Coalition abuses its authority, if it becomes what you claim to oppose, there will be consequences. Good, Foster said. We need someone watching us. Power without accountability corrupts. We're counting on the Council to keep us honest. It was, Thorum thought, a surprisingly mature perspective for such a young species. Perhaps humanity understood power better than he had given them credit for. As Foster left, Thorum looked at the star charts on his wall, showing the vast expanse of Council space. Somewhere out there, distress calls were being sent. Somewhere, people were suffering. For the first time in his long career, Thorum felt hope that someone would answer. Rain fell on Haven's Rest for the first time in 6 months. Natural rain from clouds that formed when the atmospheric processors finally stabilized. Elder Nisara stood in the central plaza, letting the water wash over her face, remembering when she thought her world would never heal. Around her, the colony thrived. New buildings rose where ruins had stood, designed by Talreen architects but built with human engineering techniques. Gardens bloomed in spaces that had been scorched wasteland. Children played near a fountain that human marines had helped install, their laughter echoing off walls that bore memorial plaques for those who had not survived. Captain Ndi walked beside her, sharing an umbrella that looked comically small in his hands. He had returned to oversee the dedication ceremony, leaving his carrier group only briefly. The Rapid Response Coalition kept him busy these days. "Your people have done well," he said, watching a group of young Talreen tend to a flower bed. "We learned from excellent teachers," Nisara replied. "Human resilience is contagious." They walked to the memorial, a curved wall of polished stone that held 843 names. Flowers surrounded it, left by survivors and visitors alike. Human engineers had carved the names with such precision that each letter seemed to glow in the rain. Nisara placed her hand on the stone, feeling the cool surface. "Do you ever wonder if it was worth it?" 800 dead, the political chaos, everything that followed, every single day, Ndi admitted. "But I also know 843 is fewer than 4,000. We saved 3,000 lives. That has to mean something." "It means everything," Nisara said quietly. The dedication ceremony began at midday. Representatives from the Coalition, the Council, and dozens of other species attended. Ambassador Foster gave a brief speech about remembrance and resilience. Council Speaker Thorum spoke about learning from failure and building better systems. But the most powerful moment came when a young Talreen girl, barely 10 cycles old, stepped forward. Her name was Lyra. She had lost her parents in the Krath attack. She spoke in a voice that barely carried. But the entire crowd fell silent to hear her. "I don't remember my mother's face anymore. I try, but it fades. But I remember the humans coming. I remember a soldier named Riley who carried me out of the shelter. He had kind eyes. He told me I was brave. I wasn't brave. I was scared, but he made me believe I could be brave." She paused, tears streaming down her face. "The council says we should move forward. Forget the past. Build the future. But I don't want to forget. My parents died because no one cared enough to help. They lived because once, long ago, they believed the galaxy was good. I want to believe that too. The humans showed me I can. Not because the galaxy is good, but because we can make it good. One choice at a time." The crowd stood in silence long after she finished. Nisara saw humans wiping tears from their eyes. Even Thorum looked affected, his usually composed expression cracking slightly. Admiral Okoye arrived later that evening, her flagship in orbit with a small security detail. She had aged in the 6 months since Haven's Rest, the weight of command showing in new lines around her eyes. But she smiled when she saw the rebuilt colony, genuine pride in her expression. "You've worked miracles," she told Nisara. "We had help," Nisara said, "and we're not finished. There's a proposal I want to discuss with you." They walked to Nisara's office, rebuilt in the traditional Talreen style but reinforced with human materials. Nisara pulled up plans that had been weeks in development. "We want to build an academy here, a training center for the Coalition. Humans can teach combat and crisis response. We can teach diplomacy and cultural integration. Other species can contribute their specialties. We make Haven's Rest a symbol of cooperation, not just survival." Okoye studied the plans carefully. "It's ambitious, expensive, political nightmare to coordinate. So was rescuing us," Nisara pointed out. "You did it anyway." Okoye laughed, a genuine sound that made her seem younger. "Fair point. I'll bring it to the Coalition Council. We'll make it happen." 3 months later, the Haven's Rest Academy opened its doors. The first class included humans, Talreen, Velen, and 8 other species. They studied together, trained together, learned each other's strengths and weaknesses. Human Marines taught hand-to-hand combat. Talreen philosophers taught conflict resolution. Meridian engineers taught sensor analysis. Commander Tanaka served as the combat instructor, pushing students harder than most thought reasonable. But he also taught them why humans fought the way they did, the philosophy behind the tactics. "We don't fight because we love violence," he told a mixed class of recruits. "We fight because we love what violence destroys." We fight to protect, to preserve, to ensure that innocent beings don't suffer alone. Never forget that distinction. The moment you start enjoying the fight, you've lost your way. Dr. Sharma led the xenobiology program, teaching students how to treat injuries across dozens of species. She emphasized adaptation and quick thinking, showing them how humans had learned to survive by understanding their environment. Every species evolved differently, she explained. What works for one might kill another. But the principle remains the same: observe, adapt, overcome. Life is tough. Be tougher. The academy became a testing ground for coalition doctrine. Students graduated with skills no single species could teach alone. They deployed to trouble spots across the galaxy, responding to crises with the speed the Council could never match. The traditional Council adapted slowly. Some members remained hostile to the coalition, seeing it as a threat to their authority. Others embraced the partnership, recognizing that the galaxy needed both approaches. Thorum found himself increasingly in the latter camp. He attended the Academy's first graduation ceremony, watching as students from across the galaxy received their commissions. The diversity was striking. Warriors and healers, diplomats and engineers, all committed to the same goal: protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. This was worth it, Thorum told Foster, standing together at the ceremony. I wasn't sure at first, but seeing this I understand. Thank you for giving us the chance, Foster said. I know it wasn't easy. It's still not easy, Thorum admitted. The traditionalists fight every reform, but Haven's Rest proved we needed to change. Your species forced us to confront our failures. Our species has plenty of failures too, Foster said quietly. We just try to fix them instead of hiding them. A distress call arrived during the celebration, interrupting the speeches. A mining colony under attack. Raiders identified as remnants of the Krath splinter groups. The coalition responded immediately. A joint task force commanded by a Velen captain with human marines and Talrine diplomatic specialists deployed within hours. They resolved the situation in 2 days. Minimal casualties, raiders captured, colonists safe. The Council provided medical support and negotiated reparations. It worked exactly as designed. Fast response from the coalition, long-term stability from the Council. Nisara watched it all from Haven's Rest, monitoring communications and providing advice when requested. This was her world now, a bridge between what the galaxy had been and what it could become. One evening she found Admiral Okoye in the Memorial Plaza, standing alone before the wall of names. The Admiral visited every time she came to Haven's Rest, spending time with the dead. Do they haunt you? Nisara asked gently. Every single one, Okoye admitted. I see their names and wonder if we could have arrived sooner, if we could have saved more. You saved thousands. That should bring peace. It doesn't work that way. Not for humans. We remember the ones we lost more than the ones we saved. It's a flaw in our design. Or a strength, Nisara suggested. It means you'll never stop trying to do better. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors that hadn't been visible 6 months ago. The colony hummed with life around them, proof that destruction could be overcome, that hopelessness could be defeated. I've been teaching your philosophy texts to my officers, Okoye said, the ones about finding peace through understanding. And what do you think? I think you and humanity approach the same truth from different directions. You seek peace through compassion. We seek it through strength. Maybe the galaxy needs both. Maybe it does, Nisara agreed. A message arrived from Earth, forwarded through coalition channels. The Third Fleet was being recalled for refit and reassignment. Okoye would return home for the first time in a year. New crews would take over patrol duties, maintaining the coalition presence. Will you come back? Nisara asked. Always, Okoye promised. Haven's Rest is where it started. Where we proved the coalition could work, I'll always come back. The Admiral departed the next morning, her flagship rising into a clear sky. Nisara watched it go, feeling the familiar ache of loss but also the warmth of friendship. Humans had come from across the galaxy to save strangers. In doing so, they had created family. Years passed. The coalition grew stronger, the Council more responsive. More species joined, bringing new perspectives and capabilities. The Krath Dominion reformed under external pressure, their raiding culture slowly giving way to legitimate trade. Haven's Rest Academy graduated hundreds of officers, each one carrying the lesson that power meant nothing without the will to protect. Nisara grew old, eventually passing leadership to younger Talreen. But she never stopped teaching, never stopped sharing the story of how humanity had answered when no one else would. Her students carried that story across the galaxy, a reminder that civilization was measured not by wealth or power, but by willingness to help those in need. On her last day, weak but content, Nisara sat in the memorial plaza surrounded by flowers and friends. Human, Talreen, Velen, and dozens of other species came to pay respects. She looked at them all and smiled. "We built something good," she whispered. "Tell the children. Tell them the galaxy can be better. Tell them about the day the Deathworlders came and everything changed." They told the children. They always would. Far above, in the orbital station that now protected Haven's Rest, a new generation of coalition officers monitored the void, human and alien working side by side, united by purpose rather than species. When the next distress call came, they would answer. They would always answer. The galaxy had learned its lesson. In the darkness between stars, when terror came and hope faded, someone would respond, not because it was profitable or convenient, but because it was right. And that made all the difference.